Alrighty guys, let's begin. So why speaking? Why is communicating your message or learning how to speak better so important? Why have we chosen this topic? Well, I just said it there. Communicating your message. What is the point of knowing everything you know and basically gathering information all your life if you can't communicate it to people? So let's make it personalized for us. Take for example making videos. We're always making videos, but I don't know if you guys notice, but a lot of the time it's hard to keep watching because we act, or the way we record seems like we don't know what we're talking about sometimes because we're not that good at communicating. Or just when you're basically trying to get information from people, you need to learn these skills to be able to do that better. And obviously this comes from experience, but we thought we'd do this video to sort of accelerate that learning curve and learn how to communicate. So we're going to learn how to communicate our message and speak better. All these different skills you can utilize to up your communication skills. So that's why we decided to do it, especially with making videos. Like I said, it'll be a big game changer. So next one. Alright, speaking. Where do we start? How do you improve? What's step one of the process of becoming a better speaker? And step one is finding out what kind of a speaker you are. So in this world there are many great leaders who are great speakers, and there are many great speakers. And they all have things in common, that they are very likable, because they all have great stories, but they all are unique in their own way. For example, Donald Trump, he's very likable for his charisma. He's very charismatic. He's kind of careless, but in a good way, and he has very powerful. He makes very powerful decisions that people like and agree with. Another example, Martin Luther King. He was loved and is one of the greatest speakers to this day. He was loved for his powerful words. Each great speaker is great in their own way. They do have things in common, but they are great in their own unique way. For you to become a better speaker, you need to find out what kind of a speaker you are. And the way to do that is you need to analyze yourself and figure out the points and traits that you have that could make you a great speaker. For example, me and my brother Adrian, we record videos. I look back at them, and honestly, sometimes the way I speak in the videos is basically reflects on what my mood is. You want to look at your videos, see how you act, and you also want to see how you are by yourself and see how you act by yourself. And to find that out, you'll find out if you're humorous, because in real life I like to think myself as a humorous person, but in the videos I'm kind of boring and not talking with enthusiasm. So you need to take your traits that you have in your real life and bring them into your speaking and elaborate from there and build from there, and that is how you become a great speaker. Use your traits and become a great speaker. Alright, so as you can see, we've got a bit of a change of scenery, but it won't change things too much. I'm standing now, so it'll be more like an actual speech. So now let's talk about the ground rules, or the basic things that make good speakers good, and the basics that you need to take into a talk. So first let's start with intention. Every good speaker has an intention. You know, you might be selling something, you might be teaching someone something or people something, like I'm teaching you what I've learned during this week's research right now. And you've got to make sure you know what your intention is before you go into your talk. The way you go into the talk is revolving on your intention. So you might change things depending on, say you're selling something, you might have a more taking approach, and say you're doing something more like me, more giving information and trying to teach people something. So that's just something basic that you've got to basically keep in mind. Make sure you revolve your talk around your intention. It'll make things much easier, and people will relate to it more and will be able to learn from you more. So next, let's talk about another very important thing, and this is how to act in a speech when you're giving a talk, when you're just having a conversation and you're trying to get your message across. It's important, especially when giving a speech, that you don't treat it like a performance. Remember, it's not like you're doing a performance like you're acting in a play. You're not reading off a script here. You might have a few bullet notes, but you're not reading off any script. So a good way to do it is treat it like it's a conversation. But obviously, it's depending on your scenario, but try find the middle ground between a conversation and a performance, like I'm doing now. I'm trying to treat it more casual, like a conversation, but I'm not completely performing. I don't have a script here or anything. And that way, you'll basically engage your audience much more, and they'll have a much more enjoyable time. And if they're enjoying themselves, they basically listen to what you're saying and they enjoy hearing you talk. So that's a very important thing. Make sure you're not treating it like a performance, because if they're just hearing all this information, they're not going to want to listen. They're like, oh, this is boring, you know, he's not making it interesting for us. So that's what you've got to do. Make sure it's a conversation. A thing that people avoid and don't think work, but absolutely does, is being bold and being honest and just speaking what's on your mind. And so many speakers do this, like his name is the Trillionaire Man. You probably haven't heard of him, but I don't know much about him either. But he basically abuses and assaults his crowd the whole time, swears at him, and all that stuff. And people love him for it because he's so brutally honest. You know, it's just exciting to watch, really. And obviously, you don't have to take it to that extent. But it's very good to be bold and honest. You're like, oh, I can't believe you just said that, you know. You got to have that approach. And this obviously depends on what type of speaking you do. But I like to be a bit bold and honest. And I think it works pretty well. Now let's talk about probably the most important thing of giving a talk or trying to teach someone something. And this is what all good talkers do and good speakers do, is they leave their audience with a solution, with an action to take after. Because if you think about it, if you give all this info in your presentation, however it is, you basically, they stop thinking about it then and there as soon as you stop talking. If you give them an action or a solution, it's basically giving your talk meaning, and then you're not just telling all this information. They're like, all right, cool. Well, say like I've been researching about Wim Hof and his method for the past week. The video's not up yet, but when I'm basically, say I'm talking about that, say Wim Hof is giving a talk about why his methods are so good, why his cold therapy, all this stuff is important, but then he doesn't tell anyone you should do this. If he told everyone after, you should have cold showers and you should do this breathing method because it helps you out with this, this and that. So there's no point. It gives your talk, your presentation meaning if you give an action or solution at the end, and all good speakers do this. So I think that's going to sum up this bit of the video, and let's continue. So now let's go on further from what I was just talking about and talk about how to engage your audience, how to get your audience into it, and how to get them to listen to you. So first let's start with be energetic and be into what you're saying. And this is a very obvious one, you know. If you're not feeling it, or you're acting very down, you're acting very, you know, like sad or whatever, they're not going to be interested in you, and they're not going to want to listen. They're going to be just sitting there awkwardly. And that's the next thing I want to talk about. Don't make this whole thing an awkward experience. And that's why we say, you know, be conversational. Don't treat it as like, you know, I'm just reading off a script like this. You know, you want it to be enjoyable. You don't want it to be an awkward situation. The crowd shouldn't like feel sorry for you because you're so awkward out there. And this is also a pretty obvious one, but it's a thing you've got to make sure you've got down. Let's talk about how to engage your audience when you're actually presenting. So you do this by asking questions. This could be literally asking someone in the crowd, so you're having a conversation with people, ask them what they think, ask them rhetorical questions, so it gets them thinking. You want to spark their imagination and get them to visualize what you're talking about. The next thing I want to tell you is you want to make sure you get your crowd, or whoever you're talking to, you want them to be emotionally attached. You want them to be hooked on a feeling. Anyway, how do you get them emotionally attached? You do this by giving examples, and this doesn't necessarily mean they get sad or happy, but it basically gets their mind thinking, and you give stories. Stories, this is the biggest one. From the beginning of time, people have communicated through stories. And if you look at all the greatest speakers in history, comedians, anyone who basically gets engagement from their audience, they're telling stories all the time. They're giving examples. They're telling stories about their lives and other people's lives. That's the only way us people listen to what anyone's talking about. But how do you tell good stories? Well, you want to get them emotionally attached. You want to build anticipation. You want to spark curiosity. And you basically want to get people emotionally attached, and you want them to visualize what you're talking about. All great storytellers, you start thinking in your mind like, oh yeah, I can see that. I can imagine what you're talking about. That's how you tell a good story. And then it gets people's emotional emotions going and their hormones going and they're into it all of a sudden. And this is something you've got to learn over time. You've got to do from doing many talks, talking to a lot of people. Something that I try to do just naturally. I try to always give examples, give stories, but it's a very important thing, and make sure you're giving these. So there's not much more I want to talk about for the broad things of engaging people. Sean's going to talk more about little things that you can help to improve these characteristics. But hopefully you're enjoying this video so far, so let's go on. Alright, so we've just been talking about how to engage your audience. Obviously, engaging your audience is literally the most important thing when you're giving a speech, because no matter what you say, if your audience isn't engaged in what you're saying, none of it's going to matter because they didn't get what you're talking about. So when we talk about engaging your audience, you need to think about the behavioral side of things. So how you need to act and how you want your audience to react. So there are certain techniques that you can use through behavioral and body language science that can help you with this, such as making eye contact, because if you're looking at someone, they're going to notice that and they're going to look at you and listen to what you have to say. Also, your hand movement. If they're not really engaged, they're not paying attention, and they see you moving your hands around, they're going to look to see what's going on. It brings the center of attention to you and what you're doing over here. Also, things like how you're standing. If you're slouched over like this, people are going to be like, what's he doing? I don't know, I'm not going to pay attention to him. But if you're up and about, walking around, talking, trying to engage your audience, they will listen to you. And there's a much higher chance you'll get what you want out of the audience when you do things like that. Also, how you carry yourself. You walk in with your shoulders up, ready to do business, they're going to be listening to you and listening to what you have to say. So again, don't slouch, don't hide your voice, hide your hands. Be open, have open body language, because then they will open up to you and they'll listen to what you have to say. Now, since we're kind of talking about the certain things that you need to do to get engagement for your audience, let's kind of talk about the do's and don'ts when speaking. So this is probably the most important thing, especially for beginners and people who aren't experienced with public speaking. So you definitely don't want to mumble and make it so the audience doesn't know what you're saying. Because say you're coming out there, you're like this, you're not confident, you're mumbling, you're low talking, you're kind of jumbling around your words. That's called mumbling. People aren't going to understand what the hell you're saying. You go up to them after and you're going to be like, hey, do you like what I had to say? Like, I didn't understand one word you said, man. And that's not going to be good for anyone. They'll be awkward, they'll be disappointing, basically. So what you want to do to avoid mumbling, first of all, you want to practice what you've got to say, because then if you know what you've got to say, you're not going to slur your words and you're not going to basically not be confident when you're speaking. When you're confident, you know what you have to say, and when you speak clearly, you're not going to mumble. Also, when you're slouched over, it tends to make you, when you're straight, you basically speak clearly. When you're slouched over, you tend to mumble and not speak as clearly. Also, if you're dehydrated and health things like that, that can also affect the way you talk. So make sure you're ready to speak and you're prepared and you're standing comfortably and in a position where everything will go properly, so you can talk properly. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the behavioral techniques, I mentioned you should look in the audience, make eye contact so they pay attention to you. If you're not, if you're looking away, you're doing this, it makes you look like you're unsure of yourself. Even maybe you are, but it will make you look like you're unsure of yourself and you're trying to think of what to say. And it also will draw the attention away from you because you're not directly talking to the audience, and they'll feel like they're not a part of the conversation because you're not engaged with them. So make sure you're keeping eye contact as much as possible. Also, you do not want to ramble on, because if you want people to engage with you and listen to what you have to say, you need to get straight to the point so they have no excuse but to listen to what you have to say. If you start building up to it and going off topic and just talking about things that don't matter or aren't as important as your main point, people aren't going to listen. If you get straight to the point and say what you have to say straight up, they'll have no choice but to listen to what you have to say, and that is the way to do it. So probably the most important thing, or one thing that we should all work on, is being enthusiastic. Because if you're enthusiastic, the audience will be enthusiastic about what you have to say. Especially if you're trying to persuade someone of something, or if you're selling something. If you're not enthusiastic, why should they be enthusiastic? You know what I mean? So make sure you're up and about, you're a more enthusiastic version of yourself, and that will help your speech basically. That's really all the things that you need to worry about when you're speaking. All those behavioral things, those techniques, like to make sure you're engaged. That's all we're going to talk about for how to engage your audience. Now let's go on to the next part of this presentation. Alright, everyone watching, we're coming to the end of the video. We just will say a few closing points about speaking that we didn't mention in the presentation. So I'll just start off with saying, we didn't mention this, but it's obvious, but we didn't mention it, so I'll mention it now. That is practice. If you don't practice, all these things that we have told you about in this video won't matter, because practicing will make you get better at all these techniques. So practice means doing it a lot, so giving a lot of talks, talking to a lot of people, and doing it over and over again. But it also means just rehearsing by yourself at home. So when you're making if you make videos like we do, look back at your videos and maybe do a few more takes and try to improve based on what you see and stuff like that. Because practice does make perfect, and that is probably the best tip we can give you for being a better speaker, to be honest.
To conclude this video. So now that we're done talking about all the info we wanted to include in this video, let's just talk about how this had an effect on us and how it helped us. So just from recording today, the whole day, and applying these techniques and skills that we've acquired and learned, is already feeling like we're one step closer. It already feels like we learned a lot of things, and I can already see that our YouTube videos can improve from this. And just the clips we recorded, it felt like I was more engaging. You know, it may have been a more boring topic, but it felt more engaging, and it felt like we can definitely apply this. And this will help our YouTube videos. This will help, just talking to someone and trying to, get our points across, get our argument across to them, and just conversing in general. It's a more boring topic, but it's definitely an important one that we needed to do. So yeah.
Alright, so we've pretty much covered everything in this video. If you have missed anything, comment down below, and we'll take up on your comment. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you next video.
See ya.